Okay.
Just 1 second. You can start, Johannes.
Okay, thank you, David. We are live on YouTube. Welcome to another coordinating collective meeting of DiEM25. Yeah, I'm Johannes Fair. I'm the volunteer coordinator here, and I was picked by my comrades today to moderate. And as always, we are starting with a view on the situation in Europe and the world in this special time of the COVID-19. And I believe we had some happenings in Serbia and other countries in the last days. So yeah, I can see Ivana's hand. You can start, Ivana.
Thank you, Johannes. Yes, we had big protests last night in Belgrade, and probably another one will happen as we speak or start. In short, after the very strict corona measures during the lockdown, and then complete release of these measures because of the electoral campaign and the elections, which were so obviously rigged, Vučić and his party ensured this complete majority of the parliament. However, at yesterday's addressing to the nation, he announced that this weekend will be another curfew of 48 hours and some other restrictive measures to come. And people went out to protest, not so much because of the measures against corona, because it's definitely spreading more than before. Our health system is completely collapsed. Hospitals are full. There are no resources, not enough doctors, not enough medications or whatsoever. So that was the cause of the people, of the common people, to get out on the street yesterday. However, some right-wing groups infiltrated the protest, tried to barge into the parliament, which of course was followed by a reaction from the police. It was a surprisingly small amount of the police on the street, so I guess that their reaction was also over exaggerated, so to say. So a lot of tear gas was used, horses were on the streets, dogs, and a lot of police in the civilian clothes. So we are still to see what's going on, what is going to happen tonight. Neither opposition or these right-wing blocs are a good news if they try to hijack the protest. So it is yet to see. Maybe Srećko would like to pick up here and address Croatian elections and also the position of European Union towards these kinds of governments, which are quite clearly authoritarian, at least to say.
Yeah, gladly. So first of all my support and solidarity to Ivana and to everyone in Belgrade and Serbia. We have many friends who have been to the protest yesterday. So besides the pandemic and COVID-19, there has also been tear gas on the streets and so on. What I want to address, because this situation in Serbia is now really, as Ivana knows, boiling, and probably it's unprecedented. It reminds of the Milosevic days in the way Vučić is handling the crisis currently, and it can go in all directions. So I think we should be, as DiEM25, ready to react immediately. And I also have a concrete proposal which is connected also to Croatia. So what is it about? I think there are many parallels between Croatia and Serbia. Luckily, we still don't have such an autocratic government in power, but the parallels are that we were in a COVID-19 situation for a few months. There was full lockdown, in Serbia curfew and so on. And then in both countries, in Croatia and Serbia, there were elections, and everything what was in place before now suddenly was completely open. In Croatia, you have a situation that we have 40,000 tourists at this moment, which means around 40,000 people entering Croatia every day. Of course, if you have money, so if you belong to the class which is able to travel, which I think is also leading to a possible situation like Serbia, not in the sense of police violence, but in the sense of rising COVID cases. I think what we as DiEM25, where our focus attention has to go, because we are a movement, Democracy in Europe movement, is towards the European deep establishment, or what I would call the extreme center, because one of the parallels and connecting points between Croatia and Serbia was that just before the elections in Serbia, it was Donald Tusk and the EPP who supported the government of Vučić. Just before the European elections, now 1 week ago, it was Donald Tusk, and you've probably seen also Ursula von der Leyen, who is shooting a video of support for the Conservative Party in Croatia behind the European Union flag. She apologized, I think, today or something, but I think it clearly shows that it is the extreme center or the deep establishment of the European Union who is supporting conservative governments, or in the case of Serbia, autocratic governments, and actually helping to escalate the situation. So the virus of structural violence, the virus of police brutality, which we can see now in the streets of Serbia, is not just something to blame Vučić, but we should also blame Ursula von der Leyen, Donald Tusk, and the current establishment of the EU. So I think I stop here. I mean, I can give you a bigger update. Yeah, Croatian elections, small update as well. But before I go there, I think we as DiEM25 should close a look at the situation, what's happening now in the Balkans, and perhaps write a short statement, but very harsh statement against Donald Tusk, Ursula von der Leyen, and show, because that was always our theory, it was always what we claimed, that it is the center which is feeding the extreme right politics. So I think that's my proposal for the CC, that we should work on it today, tomorrow, release it ideally on Friday. And short update, and then I stop, is that you remember last week, thanks Yanis a lot for the quote and for the support for Možemo in Croatia. Everyone expected 2 to 4 places. They got 7 places in the parliament. And I think this is, among the sea of bad news, this is the currently the best news coming from the Balkans. I think that finally, besides the left party in Slovenia, Levica, there is a green left coalition in the Croatian parliament currently. So not everything is dark. I hope in Serbia, our friends and comrades will also go slowly in that direction, although the situation now is very worrying. Oh, David, how can you be there now?
We stole him from you.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm late. This is the live part, so be quiet. Srečko is talking seriously. Sorry, Srečko, about this.
Yeah, no, I'll stop now. This was like a deja vu. I see David again. I saw him the other day here.
He's island hopping.
Yeah. Okay, I stop here. So I have a concrete proposal for a statement. Maybe Yanis can also give his view, what he thinks. And the second one, well, Ivana has to tell us what concretely can we do regarding Serbia besides just writing the statement.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivana and Srečko. I have Judith and Eric on the speakers list in terms of going woman, man. There will be a woman now, Judith, and then Eric.
Yeah, it seems to be working out better this time. So just a quick update from Germany. We have 2 major issues. One is that in the course of Black Lives Matter, there has been talk about investigating German police. There are some irregularities, like the case of an African migrant who was killed in police custody, and 15 years later, still nobody found anything wrong, and the judges are passing this case, like trying to bury it. So some trying to make progress on that. And also Germany has now the presidency of the European Council. And for anyone who was hoping that this would lead to more green investment, I think we got a buzzer today, because Peter Altmaier, on his opening statement to the European Parliament. You know, he's the Minister for the Economy and Energy. And on his statement, he said that Nord Stream will be really important, and we need to import more gas from the Soviet Union. So you can tell that, yeah, and he actually put this in the context of the Green New Deal. He said something like, with the Green New Deal, we now need, yeah, it's ridiculous.
Thanks for bringing back the Soviet Union. It made me feel young again.
Yeah, there's actually a video of him saying that. Maybe we should comment it.
Okay, thank you, Judith. Eric.
Very briefly, a common thread about things that we've been discussing is the concept of police brutality, the right to demonstration, and in general, I think that's one of the areas that we need to be quite aware of and be quite wary of as a movement, but in general as citizens as well. It is a time of shifts and of things being in flux. And one of the first things that we saw was the suspension of the right to gather, right, as under the guise of protection for the pandemic. And that was all well and good. But I remember in a couple of CC calls now, we have been discussing some of the policies that have been implemented around Europe, which might outstay their welcome past the pandemic crisis. And the right to demonstrate, the right to gather seems to be one of those. We have examples here in Belgium of a number of demonstrations not being allowed by local authorities on the basis of the pandemic, although those policies in theory have been suspended. And then, you know, it's an insidious slide from we're doing this for your own good because of the pandemic to we're doing this for your own good because of violence. And here, again, I would also like to pass the ball to Yanis, because I know that with Meta25, they were out in the streets yesterday demonstrating essentially the criminalization of demonstration in Greece, and not even under the guise of COVID-19 and the pandemic, but a full-out criminalization of that civil right. So yeah, I think this is one of the areas where we need to keep a keen eye on and stay on top of that debate and on top of that struggle.
Thank you, Eric. I think we'll go, before we go to Greece, we'll shortly go to Spain. So I have on the speakers list Luis, and then Sissi and Yanis. Luis, please.
Right, thanks. So briefly, things are not critical here yet, but they're turning a little bit delicate. We now have back in confinement almost 300,000 people. You know, with the doors open again for tourism, which was very necessary for the government to get the economy back going. We're expecting that those figures to worsen, of course. I guess the worrisome backdrop is obviously the fact that our debt to GDP ratio is now exploding because of all the spending that the government has had to do. And on top of it, the president acknowledged that we're still waiting for Europe to come through. If that doesn't happen, we will see a likely scenario, which also the government has hinted to increase taxes, because there's only one way to get out of deficit, right? Either, you know, increasing investment and income, or lowering expenditure. So that's austerity in one word. So again, it's not critical, but it's not looking good. So we're, you know, keeping attention to that.
Thank you, Luis. And then I would go to Sissi first, and then to Yanis.
Right. Here in Greece, we are in a whirlwind of scandals that were committed by the previous Syriza government, and that have been exposed now by the right-wing government. So we are sort of stuck in a situation in which the supposed moral advantage of the first left-wing government, supposedly left-wing government in Greece, has evaporated completely. And this is a problem because it goes back to two issues. First, the way this the Syriza party ended up being constituted as a state party that is trying to enjoy and take full advantage of the state advantages offered to the governing parties. The second problem is, unfortunately, for a country in which the left has written glorious pages in history, a country of resistance based on the sacrifice of leftist people, communist, left-wing progressive people who at least had one asset, and that was the morality and the purity of their convictions and principles. The whole story ends up in a way which, in my opinion, promotes the ultra-right wing on the basis of all these people are the same, both left and right wing are the same. Once they get in power, then there is no more advantage on the part of the left. It's a sad story because it makes our struggle more difficult, but perhaps more necessary than any other time to prove as Mera that we are the descendants and those who will continue this glorious tradition of left-wing struggle, a tradition that basically promotes lack of self-interest and personal commitment to a cause without any advantage for yourself. In other words, I find, and I'm closing with this, on the one hand, difficult for the left as a notion in my country to prove that it can do better in terms of the moral principles and the political practicing of these principles. But at the same time, it opens up a privileged sort of terrain for Mera to prove that there are people who are truly different. And this makes our statute and our principles of organization even more important, not only for us, but for Greece in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Sissi. Yeah, I have Yanis and then Jordi, and I guess then it would also be good to move on to the next agenda topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Johannes. Thank you all, Sissi, everyone for participating in what is, I think, an essential roundup of what's happening around Europe. I shall begin from the big picture and end up with the tiny picture of Greece. But the big picture concerns Europe. Look, comrades, the reason why DiEM25 go together and we formed this transnational movement was because by 2015 it had become abundantly clear to many of us across Europe that the European Union was stuck. It was in a dead end. The dead end was a result of trying to save the bankers at the expense of the many in Greece and Germany, in Italy and in Holland. And what made that evident was, first, the ground awakening of the victims of austerity in Spain, initially with the Indignados, and in Greece with the Aganaktismeni, which then gave rise to political parties that seemed capable of challenging the establishment, like Podemos in Spain, Syriza in Greece, but also to some extent Die Linke in Germany, the Corbynistas in Britain, the Mélenchonites in France. There seemed to be a sea change, spearheaded quite naturally by Syriza, because Greece was the worst hit part of the whole European Union agglomeration. So it made sense that the people that suffered the most had created the party that rose out of the indignados, the aganatismeni, the people on the street, and had the greatest chance of challenging the environment. And then the crashing of the Greek Spring in the summer of 2015 was a milestone. It was a significant moment. I'm not going to repeat everything you know, but what I'm going to say is that since then, we have a massive deterioration. On the one hand, the movement has been crushed, not only in Greece, but throughout Europe. The movement that I described has gone. The people are there, but the movement is not moving. And that includes DiEM. If we are relatively tepid compared to 3-4 years ago, it's because this reflects the state of affairs across Europe. Allow me to use a metaphor. The little people, the weak, the workers, the precariat, and so on, they don't get that many opportunities to rebel. In 2014, 2015, during the first 5 years of the Euro crisis, I understand what our people, the masses of Europe, felt like. It was like, being on the edge of the precipice, on the edge of, if you want, a well, and struggling, to move beyond the edge. And we were smacked through internal strife, through the treachery of Syriza in particular, and we've started falling into the well collectively. And, for years we were trying to hold on. By 2017, 2018, I believe that we hit the bottom. And at that point, you look up at the top of the well where there's the light, and it's too slippery to climb out, and you start shriveling and shrinking, and the feeling shrinks. Our job as DiEM25 is, to revive the spirits, and at the same time to keep the analysis going. Because, comrades, the enemy, which is a combination of von der Leyen and Orbán. Von der Leyen and Orbán are one and the same. This is the DiEM line from the beginning. And anyone who doubts it, look at the voting record. See how von der Leyen became president of the European Commission with the votes of Orbán. So Tweedledum and Tweedledee. They are different sides of the same authoritarian coin. One is very civilized face. The other is the ugly face, the good cop and the bad cop, but they are one and the same. Now, what we're facing now as European progressives, as DiEMers, as all the people out there who are not with DiEM, who haven't heard of DiEM, but are longing for a progressive rebellion, a progressive movement. What we're facing is an establishment, an authoritarian establishment, the von der Leyens and the Orbáns, who have become very sophisticated to how they were between 2010 and 2015. And I'll give you 2 examples. Today, Christine Lagarde came out and committed the European Central Bank to green bond buying. The billions that she's going to be printing from now on, she says, is all going to be invested or used to purchase green stuff. Now, of course, all this is mockery. There is no way of doing that or testing for that. But this is a very sophisticated campaign. Secondly, there is all this talk. I mean, now talk about Spain. Sanchez is appearing as the great warrior on behalf of the many in favor of the recovery fund as proposed by von der Leyen. And you have Rutte, the Prime Minister of Holland, appearing as the bad guy, the bad cop, who is trying to smack this down. This is all theater. They've already agreed in advance what's going to happen. Already, they may have some small differences, they will resolve them. But the purpose of this theater is to distract us from what is really happening. Because the recovery fund is irrelevant. Absolutely, utterly irrelevant. What matters is the return of the fiscal compact. because Luis mentioned before the huge increase in the state deficit. Now, if you have 10% of national income deficit, and you need to eradicate this by next year or 2 years, this can only happen by means of an austerity program that will be the mother of all austerity programs. The recovery fund, however they configure it, is going to be like aspirin to a cancer patient. And it was always meant to be like that. It was always meant to be the cover. You see, in 2010, 11, 12, with the Indignados and the Anarchismeni and our movements building up, they were not at all sophisticated. They were not doing anything. They were sending the Troika in and saying, you know, cut, 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 cut. Now they have green bonds, but not a Green New Deal. They have a New Deal, but not a Green New Deal. They have a recovery fund, but no recovery for the many, just for some corporations, large corporations. And they have used this fantastic propaganda machine. Yeah, even some of our members have been fooled into believing, this time, you know, there is room for doing good things with the recovery fund. And maybe there's an opening for a unification of the European Union. None of that is true. I wish it was, but it isn't. So we need to organize. We need to mobilize. And we need to try to do almost the impossible. Because in 2010, 11, 12, you know, there was a movement that was building on the incompetence of the authoritarian establishment on the one hand, and on the hope that had not been dashed yet of the many. Now the establishment is competent in terms of Goebbels, of propaganda, and the many are disheartened. So it's what Sisi said. Our task now is harder and is more essential than ever. Since the beginning, if you read our manifesto, we have been saying from day one of DiEM25 that business as usual, which is what the establishment is trying to impose, can only be pursued through authoritarianism, through increasing degrees of authoritarianism. Previous speakers mentioned exactly that. This afternoon, I was in Parliament. I gave a speech against the bill which is being debated in Parliament that effectively bans demonstrations. It does this indirectly. Up until now, the default was that you could demonstrate as long as you stayed within certain rules. Now you have to seek the permission of the police in order for your demonstration not to be illegal. That change of default is the change from liberalism to fascism, to authoritarianism. I gave as powerful a speech as I could today. Yesterday, Mera25 was the only parliamentary party that participated in a noisy demonstration on the street. Syriza was completely absent. Even the Communist Party was completely absent. We were the only, I'll say this once again, we have 9 out of 300 MPs. We were the only members of parliament out there on the streets. Okay, so know that. And DMS should know this across Europe. This is why I'm coming to I'm starting from the grand view and coming to the minute view. As you know, we are now voting for the statutes of Mera25. This is utterly connected, because anybody who looks at these statutes will realize that this is a result of serious participatory democratic work in the context of DiEM25 and in complete accordance with the organizing principles of DiEM25 and particularly the values of DiEM25. It is the only way of restoring the values of the left, of progressives, of liberals even. The values that the liberals, the supposed leftists, completely jettisoned and discredited, not only in Greece, but everywhere. So I want to plead with members to take this larger view. DiEM has never been more essential than ever. We need unity with boisterous debate amongst ourselves, but we need extroversion. We've had 1 year during which we looked inside our movement, Now we should be looking towards our electoral wings in the way we're doing with MERA and the statutes to make sure that our electoral wings are not make-believe parties, but they are actual living, breathing, participatory parties that enable our party members to do things, to get out there and struggle, while the movement hits the streets against the authoritarianism of the von der Leyens and the Orbáns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yannis. And we have Hardy to close this point.
Yeah, thank you. Just, I mean, it's not a closing. I think Yannis did a kind of closing in that way, but just a brief note that something related about what everybody said, but very specific and very important too. It affects, especially in Spain, but I think it's something that it's going around Europe everywhere. While they are announcing the recovery funds and all this spending, at the same time, they are starting an indirect way of austerity through municipalities. They are strangling the financial situation of the city councils. In Barcelona, we are obliged to cut more than 15% of our budget this year and next year, and the central government refuses to change any law. I don't know if you are aware of that, but in Spain we changed the constitution in 2012 because Merkel gave specific instructions about that. So they are not changing any of those laws that led us to austerity. And at this moment, they are really strangling the finances of the municipalities. I say that this is something not only in Spain, but especially in Spain. And we have to think that municipalities spend most of the social spending, most of the spending that goes to the smaller businesses or the weaker people. So this is the austerity of this new crisis has already started. And if we think that democracy goes through a decentralization of the administration, especially through cities, this is the first direct attack to this situation, strangling this financial situation of the municipalities. I think this is very important, what is going on already.
Thank you, Hardy, and yeah, very true. Thank you all for the big picture. Now we're going on with our topics, and the second one is exciting tech news by Judith.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get some attention for this. Let me share. Can you let me share the screen? Just click on this little button to allow sharing. Who's the host?
David is working on it.
You should be able to do it now.
Yep. All right. Thank you. Yeah, so first, let me remind everyone that we're voting on the MERA statutes. And so far, we've only had 274 cast votes, so we could definitely use some more. Please go vote if you can. MERA has also created this bill that will be presented in the parliament in autumn. And for the purpose of allowing citizens to participate in the editing of this bill and to suggest new ideas or changes or removals, they have requested this tool, which our tech team just finished coding, so that you're able to read the bill right here and then like make changes and add other stuff. And this is available to all members and even members of the public. And this tool is not just for MERA, but we could use it, for example, also to edit a transparency paper to say that we're allowing all DiEM members to write their ideas for the transparency paper in this way. So it would be a good tool for the progressive agenda. And now you may think that it's similar to Google Docs, but in fact, it's much more powerful because on the one hand, you can write your changes and you can see what changes you write. But the people who have to afterwards collect it, who have to bring together all these changes, they will see just the different articles that are changed. So they will see section 1, first paragraph, someone suggested the word participatory. And they will see also section 1, paragraph 1, someone suggested to remove this bit. So they will be able to go through all the feedback much more clearly, and it won't become a big mess.
My software got a little bit too excited, and now I had some problems finding the unmute button. Sorry for that. Thanks, Judith, for also very visually sharing that. I believe Eric has a point on this.
Just very briefly, I want to congratulate Judith for the absolutely shockingly important work that she does, and especially in this case has done. I don't think this can be underestimated in terms of going the full length of the way towards not being just another political party. It's exactly these kinds of innovations that show that democracy can be done differently, and especially parliamentary democracy can be much more deliberative and much more inclusive than it currently is. And it's this kind of work that I think is very, very exciting and shows that we go that extra mile. I think there is much that we can do to also incorporate this in the formation of our policy papers for the pillars. It will make the life of a lot of many of our volunteers much, much easier. And in general, introducing this together with the impeccable work done on the Meta25 statutes as a kind of blueprint or a template for our work across Europe. It's really an incredible foundation on which we can build everywhere where DiEM25 is active. So well done to everyone involved, and congratulations to all of us for it.
Yes, Yanis.
I need to congratulate and thank Judith on behalf of everyone as well. It is remarkable work. Anybody who knows how much effort needs to go into this, and ingenuity and innovation, understands and appreciates the towering achievement that it constitutes. In our case, in case of Meta25, our comrades just can't even believe their luck that we have access to these tools. And in addition to that, the swiftness with which our vote for the Meta25 statutes has been organized is something that nobody believed it could be done. Thanks to Judith and Elena and other comrades from Meta25 and 20 or 30 volunteers who helped with the translation, and especially Ariana, our great comrade, who is responsible for the Greek to English translations. Those who are watching, those who want to know how the CC works and how everybody around it works, take note of the incredible amount of back-breaking work that takes place mostly by volunteers.
Yes, I fully agree on that. Volunteers are essential. So thank you, everybody. I believe we close this point and come to the next point, which is the questionnaire assembly proposal that Eric has been introducing to us in our last call. And I would believe that we are about to take a decision on this. And maybe, Eric, you can introduce it again to everybody.
Very briefly, you've all had it in your inboxes. It's also been posted in the forum for our members. The response has been overwhelmingly positive, which gives us heart. The idea behind this is it's not a self-standing thing. It's really a bringing together of various strands of DiEM25's works and our projected priorities, goals, and etc. in order to compile one centralized program and project for the next essentially year and a half. You might have seen the timeline that essentially takes us from today to January 2021. The idea behind it is essentially the revival of spirits that Jens was referring to earlier, of Europeans, this idea that before reforming Europe, we need to convince Europe's citizens that Europe can be a force for good. And in order for them to be convinced they can be a force for good, this isn't something to be achieved by waving an EU flag in a square somewhere, but to really engage with our communities everywhere and together to conceive of a political program that could introduce Europe as a force for good in their day-to-day lives, in the kind of political challenges and problems that they face. And in order to do that, we need to do what everybody else who has tried to tackle the European idea has failed to do, which is to bring Europe to the national level and make it relevant to citizens in the way through which they understand politics, the national and local political scene. This is what lies behind this idea. But at the same time, also, we need to recognize that after 3-4 years of existence, and especially after the last year, which was largely a reflective, reorganizational year for DiEM25, we have some of us have started viewing DiEM as a project in itself, not the vehicle through which to achieve a project, that project being the democratization of Europe, but DiEM becoming the project and the goal of and in itself. So this project aims to really take the energy of the membership, also based on the kind of feedback we've been receiving from members, and push it back outwards into society by gathering questions from members of DiEM25, using them as the basis for a questionnaire, a different one for each country. Those questions essentially outlining what people consider to be the biggest political questions in their city, in their community, in their nation. And based on that questionnaire, to empower our members, a single member, a local group of DiEM25, a national collective, an electoral wing, empower them with guidelines to go out with these questions and re-engage with communities, with societies, through citizens' assemblies, through local meetings in bars, and start answering some of these questions. And with the responses we'll get, to create a people-powered, progressive national agenda for each country where DiEM25 is active. This is important because it gets us to reconnect with the community that we're meant to be reaching out to, but also empowers our movement with the kind of foundation, political foundation that we need in order to build and plan our work. I'm not going to go into more detail than that. Hopefully you've read it. This is also for the people watching us to get a bit of an idea of what we're talking about. If we should have a vote on this today, I think, but regardless of the result of that vote, because this is a project that will take up a lot of the time and energy and capital of the movement, I think we should make some preparations over the summer, gather some of the questions, etc. But I believe that we should put this proposal to an all-member vote in September for our members to verify and to confirm that they agree with this direction, because it will be taking up quite a bit of the energy of all of us. So that's it for me. Happy to discuss this further. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Eric, for this nice introduction to the topic. Are there any questions or comments on this from other CC members? I don't see any hands at the moment, or stacks in the chat. Yanis.
I wasn't going to speak, but since I think that some of our comments need a warm-up, I'll try to provide it. Look, it's essential that we use whatever means are necessary in order to have a guided conversation, not a conversation that is like a random walk, as we say in mathematics, but one which is guided by our overall assessment of the problems with Europe, of Europeans. Because if we start talking about the problems of Greece or Ireland, we may just lose ourselves in the forest of the many conundrums that exist. So the point is, now that the European Parliament elections are finished, and I think I'm going to make an assessment which sounds a bit glum, but I don't think it is necessarily glum. The last European elections were the last European elections that will ever matter. We used to say that before May 2019. I think that has been confirmed. The European Parliament elections were used in order effectively to put the gravestone on top of the coffin of European democracy. Now we don't have a European democracy. You know, Macron and Merkel meet together behind closed doors. They tell Ursula things, then Ursula calls Sanchez. Sanchez, talks to Macron, and they stitch things up. Even business as usual, but worse than that, even because there's no movement, as I was saying before. So it's important for our members to come up with a very simple answer to a very simple question. What's at stake in your country from a European perspective? What do we want to do in Italy, right, regarding our European policy, and what do we want the European policy to be about Italy? And the answer we give to this question will be different, but not unrelated to the answer we give regarding Spain, regarding Ireland, regarding the United Kingdom. I think it's essential that we bring the United Kingdom into this discussion. We do not recognize Brexit in the sense that we don't care whether the United Kingdom is in the EU or not. We do care, but you know what I mean. We build up our program and our policy agenda after having this kind of inquiry, this dialectical process of Europe looking into Italy, Europe looking into Spain, Europe looking into Germany, and then Germany and Italy and Spain through the eyes of DMS looking into Europe.
Okay, thank you for the warm-up. Who feels warm-up? I think also from a German perspective of the electoral wing member, I can say that, yeah, this is of course a very important work that we need to do to have the connection between the European, the national, and also the local level. And doing that work program-wise definitely makes sense from my personal perspective. Do we have somebody else, especially maybe a woman, that wants to speak or give feedback on this topic? Ivana.
Just very shortly, that I think it's a very good outline of the next phase of DiEM, and I think it would give a good focus to our people on national levels. Just that.
Okay, Sisi.
Yes, just 2 words. I have read this proposal and the kind of mapping that it suggests, and I think it is a very, very good and, in my opinion, efficient combination of the national so-called element focusing on the post-epidemic era, which is post-capitalism, and this is the kind of thing we have to promote. And it combines this with the local movements and the sort of promotion of local and tactile, direct problems that are involved in everyday life. I think it's a brilliant combination.
Thank you, Ivana and Sisi and Simona. Unfortunately, I cannot hear you, Simona. Is it only my...
No, I also can't hear. I can see Simona moving your mouth, but there is no sound coming and you're not muted. I don't know, maybe try with your headphones.
Yeah?
Yeah, now
yes,
we can hear you.
now.
Yep.
Thank you. It's an excellent project, and this is what we really need in Italy above all. Only I have a small doubt on the tool of citizen assemblies. Maybe Eric, you can make it clear. I think there must be, being a member or not being a member of DiEM25 must make a difference. So are you thinking of citizens assemblies open to anybody, or thinking of having DiEM member showing how do we do democracy in establishing our program? For the rest, my congratulations. It's a very comprehensive and beautiful plan.
Okay, thank you, Simona. Eric, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, gladly. Right, the way, okay, this is how I conceived it when writing it, but this is of course open to reinterpretation and amendment. My understanding was that because the very point of these questionnaires is indeed to harvest the feedback from society as a whole in general and create programs that are reflective of citizens beyond their membership to our project specifically. There shouldn't be any limits to who is allowed to participate in these meetings. I wouldn't even call them citizens' assemblies, because that's a trademarked term in many ways. It's a very specific thing, and in order to do that, you need to be trained and so on. But you know, these assemblies, in any case, democratic assemblies. So I wouldn't put any limit to who gets to participate. I think everybody's view should be welcomed. However, where being a member of DiEM25 comes into bear is how this feedback is received, analyzed, and edited into a program. You know, that is something that DiEM25 will be doing. That is, it's a DiEM25 project. So that is the element where our identity, if you like, comes in. But in that part, because it is in some ways, I hate the word educational, the idea that we go out to educate people, but it is instructive for all of us to participate in these discussions. I think we shouldn't create echo chambers of our own members. It should be a broad discussion with society as a whole that will better instruct and inform our programs.
Okay, thank you, Eric. I have Yanis and Judith. I think it would also be good to slowly try to close this point and make a decision on it, since we are approaching the hour and have some agenda points left. Yanis, please.
I think I'm closer to Simona on this, Eric. Without rejecting your proposal. My point is this. The quality of a meeting with non-DiEMers depends on how solid the DiEM position is. You will recall, for instance, on the run-up to the European Parliament elections, you know, whenever DiEM had assemblies, in Germany in particular, which is where Sergio and I were involved in the electoral campaign, when we had meetings to present to a general public and seek their views on our Green New Deal. Because our Green New Deal was very precise, very specific, very coherent, the conversation was guided, structured, coherent. And then whatever feedback we got was positive, and positive in the sense of being useful. Even the disagreements we received, you know, improved our thinking. But consider the opposite situation, where we have a meeting in Italy where our own DiEMers are all over the place, or in Greece, or wherever, yeah? And we don't have a coherent policy to propose to the meeting. And you invite people, and they come in, and everybody talks about whatever, you know, comes out of their mouth. Then nothing comes out of significance. And I would like this to be taken into account. I would like a mixture of what Simona implied and what you suggested. I would like to have a situation where, you know, first we come up with a coherent, even the questions that you pose, yeah? If you don't have a coherent story in your head, the questionnaire or the list of topics to be discussed in the assembly of general citizenry is not going to be very useful.
Thank you, Yanis. Judith.
I would also see this as an opportunity to reach out to groups that are less represented in DiEM25. For example, asylum seekers or low-wage workers, to, yes, propose our policy, not to have a completely contrary stance, but to temper our positions with their real-life feedback of how this would impact them.
Okay, thank you. Eric, would you like to respond again to this?
Very briefly, I think this is more an issue when we already have a ready-made concept that we're trying to discuss. When it's an open-ended debate, then the variety of opinion, I don't think clashes as much. It's not as much of a problem because there's no particular response that we are expecting or hoping for. We're just hoping for responses. So in that sense, I don't see it as much of a problem. I do appreciate the point that Simon and Yanis are making, and I agree with it to a large extent. We should explore this further and see how we can have a healthier balance, let's say, between these approaches. But I wouldn't, personally at least, I wouldn't be in favor of completely waiving the openness of the exercise, exactly because we are trying to attract new people to DiEM. And also because it undermines the democratic credentials of the initiative. So we need some kind of balance. We need some kind of, let's say, quality control, so we don't completely derail the conversations, especially in those cases where we will have amateurs running the conversations, people who don't really know what they're doing. And this is one of the beautiful things about DiEM, by the way. We have a lot of people who have never done politics before in our ranks, which is a great thing because it means they have never been persuaded by a political actor until DiEM25 came along, and we were the first time they got engaged. But at the same time, it means that they lack some of this experience. So we need a way to secure them against these kinds of people, while at the same time not completely limiting the pool. So yeah, for more thinking needs to go into this. I agree.
Okay, from your feedback, I would think that since there's nobody on the speaker list anymore, that we could still make a decision to go forward with this, but of course taking into account and further flesh out the points that have been mentioned, especially in the last comments. That be okay with everybody? Then I guess we would vote on this point, and I ask all the elected members to raise your hand, or in case of Hosanna, who's not joining us with a picture, say into the chat if she agrees to move forward with this. Please raise your hand. Yes, I think we have a lot of yes votes. Somebody against.
It looked unanimous, Johannes.
It looked very unanimous.
That's the
Yeah.
word. It's unanimous.
Okay, unanimous decision. Very good. And we'll move forward with this. And now we will kind of go into the after hour of our CC meetings, the non-live stream part. So releasing our viewers, but I wanted to ask if somebody else has anything, any other topics before that of the CC members? Yes, Yanis.
Just a quick note for the viewers who are leaving us now as to why it is that we have a section that is not live streamed. It's something that we do without enthusiasm, but because sometimes we need to discuss personal matters, matters that emerge from personal communications that involve particular individuals. It's a question of respecting the privacy of these people who have asked us to discuss matters concerning them. So you can imagine those watching on YouTube that it would simply not be appropriate to live stream this. One day, maybe we can imagine a completely different setup where full transparency is happening, but not yet.
Okay, thank you, Yannis. I think, yeah, it's a good to always mention that why we cannot live stream every topic that we discuss. Okay, thanks very much, everybody, for tuning in, and see you next week, Thursday again, I think.